Okay, so let's start with item 6.5, 9:45 a.m. Consideration of presentation on the draft Lake County Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. We have Nicole Flora, who will take the lead, but we also have Dr. Robert Eiler with us online. Not sure if there's anyone else who's here for the, and Vicki Dole as well. The floor is yours, Nicole.
Great. Thank you, Chair Sabatier and members of the board. As mentioned, my name is Nicole Flora. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake County Economic Development Corporation. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or also referred to as CEDS. I'm going to briefly cover what the CEDS is about, why we have one, and then Dr. Eiler is going to present on some data that we sourced as part of the strategy, and then we'll dive into a little bit about how the CEDS is used in order to move forward with our economic development plans here in Lake County. The CEDS is a 5-year economic development plan. It takes into consideration the current economy as well as our unique strengths and the obstacles of our area. It's used to improve the vitality and the resilience while mitigating our obstacles. As noted at the bottom here and in the agenda packet, I believe as well, the draft CEDS can be found at that website address. Why do we create the CEDS? In short, it's to access more federal funds and also kind of bring together local plans and align them for an overall strategic goal. It does not replace or duplicate other plans. We use the work of other agencies and what they've created in order to form a wide-ranging plan. And who's in charge? Who's leading this effort? The Economic Development Corporation was able to access about $80,000 from the federal government. As part of the required process, we have to create a CEDS committee. That committee was seated by a representative from the county as well as both jurisdictions, and then the remaining seats are made up of local industry leaders. The grant funds were used to hire Chapin Concepts, which representative is on the call today, Vicki Dole, and Dr. Robert Eiler. We also contracted with Michelle Scully to perform interviews with locals to learn more about the local economy. How is it developed? So I touched on this a little bit before, but there's two major functions of the development. One is public engagement. So we, through a variety of different avenues, met with and got input from hundreds of people in Lake County through interviews, surveys, and presentations, and then also the project website. In addition, Vicki and Dr. Eiler did a lot of research, as well as Michelle Scully, did a lot of research, a lot of investigation into background documents, other organizational plans, and then interviews with business leaders. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eiler to talk a little bit about the data that is sort of the platform for which the strategy was developed. Dr. Eiler, are you on?
I am, Nicole. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. Thank you, board chair and supervisors, and I want to thank Nicole for this opportunity and for Chapin as a partner on this project. Go ahead and click forward, please. So what I want to start with in terms of the data is to think about the American economy and the current forecast, at least as of August. So one more click, I'm sorry. So these data represent what the Philadelphia Federal Reserve does every quarter, where they ask 40 forecasters what they see going forward for the American economy. And I pull 3 variables out of that forecast. First one, which has that shaded column under the word new, is real GDP growth, and we think of it as income after inflation and the percentage change from the previous year as of the last quarter. So that 2.6% in 2024 represents the current forecast of those 40 forecasters at the median forecast that they put forward for the end of this year in terms of the total year's change in Americans' ability to generate income after inflation. And that's a little bit under the long-term trend, but not too bad given we're still kind of in the very final shadow effects of COVID. You can see, though, the previous column was last quarter's forecast, which was 2.5. So they become a little bit more optimistic, but that's primarily driven by a drop in inflation that's relatively small in terms of their forecast by the end of the year, which you're going to see in just a second. And if you look forward over the next few years, there really is not much change except for 2026. They've given it a little bit of a bump, and that's because the supposition is that inflation is going to go down a little faster, and we may actually have what's called a soft landing and not have a second recession. And right now, I'll give away a little bit. We do not have a second recession currently in major forecasts out there. We will see as we creep forward into 2025 what happens. I'll talk about the probability of recession, at least in the current stage, in just a minute. Next click, please. The unemployment rate represents the number or the percentage of people who are in the labor force that are looking for work but do not have a job. You can see that in that new column versus the previous column just to its left, every single one of those numbers is up a little bit, but those numbers are historically very small. So there's still a lot of warmth in the American labor market, and we do not expect a recession primarily because we don't expect a lot of people to start losing their jobs. Now, it just so happens that in trend over the last, let's say, 6 months, we have seen a creep up of that unemployment rate, and it currently is right around or just above in a seasonally adjusted basis, that 4.1%. It'll be very intriguing in terms of how these forecasts change as we creep toward December and whether or not we see a few more job losses. But generally speaking, the labor market remains relatively warm because there's a lot more job openings out there than people looking for work. The next click is what we call core PCE inflation. Now, I'm not showing you CPI or what's called the Consumer Price Index because, in fact, the Federal Reserve uses this sort of big mouthful price index to determine whether or not they're going to change interest rates. Core PCE inflation is basically if you take everything I buy at home every month and think about how much in percentage terms the price of that stuff I buy at home changed from 1 year ago, that's the 2.8 by the end of December. So the difference, though, with classic PCE and core is that I'm going to take food and energy prices out of that bundle of stuff I buy at home because they tend to be more volatile. And I'm watching for that change to move towards 2%. Now, you can see that 2024 is 2.8, then 2.2, then 2.0. Not much change from the previous quarter, but that little click down led to a little bit of a click up in real GDP growth, and they're connected to each other naturally. But the point is that the current forecast is that we will see a drift down in inflation. A warning is that even if inflation goes down as we see on this graph or on this table, it's important to recognize that the previous inflation over the last couple of years has a compounding effect, especially on lower to middle income households and on smaller businesses. One more click, please. As I said before, there's no recession in the forecast. The probability is about 15% at the median for most forecasters, but you have to expect a few more job losses are coming. We're just starting to see the end of the consumer driving the American economy, and we're watching to see how interest rates falling might kind of weave us through, again, seeking a soft landing where we don't have a second recession, even though we had interest rates go up and we had inflation moving up simultaneously. Next slide, please. So with all that noise, I wanted to do a couple things, and thank you. Just stop there, please. So if you think continued growth is going to happen, so let's say you're kind of leaning a little bit more pessimistic versus optimistic. Well, let's talk about the optimistic first. If we continue to see labor market gains, inflation moves the way it's supposed to, we don't see a big sell-off in equity markets, interest rates remain stable and predictable, and we see some stasis in global conflict and some stasis in our own geopolitics here in the United States, growth should happen basically on those forecasts. So those forecasts are predicated upon the idea that we're going to see those things happen. If you're more pessimistic, one of the things or some of the things to watch for are the following. Are you seeing more credit delinquencies? Are you seeing more people that are getting late on payments for things like credit cards, auto payments? Hopefully not too much on mortgages, but the mortgage delinquencies after 90 days have started to creep up just a little bit. And consumer savings rates are at their lowest level in, let's say, the last couple of decades minimum. So we've really traded this sort of robust amount of savings for consumption and in some cases an inflation bridge. And we're starting to pay for that a little bit in terms of reduced demand. That continued pinch of compounding inflation, I said before, watch for small and middle income households that get further behind if inflation doesn't come back down. But we got to watch the combination of those credit delinquencies as well. That can lead to some bizarre behavior in some cases, depending on how many households are actually affected. The orders for manufacturing and managers' pessimism or optimism around what's coming in manufacturing is a classic leading indicator of the American economy. That indicator right now is suggesting we're going to see jobs either slow down in their growth or start to get have a few losses. And then the broader idea is that on the more qualitative side, we need the geopolitical issues in both our country and internationally to somewhat simmer down and become a little bit more predictable. And we, in many ways, just have to get past November 5. Next slide, please. What I want to show now is I want to show and let's do 2 more clicks, please. So I want to show the current forecast that's out there from a combination of forecasters. So Caltrans does a forecast every year doing transportation planning. Department of Finance does one for budget. EDD does one for labor markets. And I kind of take all those into consideration and kind of mold them into what I think is more reality. And if you're looking from 2010 on an annual basis forward to 2030, that shaded area is the current forecast period because we don't have actual data beyond year end 2023 in terms of labor markets. But you can see that the forecast for California, that green line, is rising. And we've basically recovered from the pandemic. So these data are indexed to be at the end of 2019, basically pre-pandemic. The green line crossed that red dotted line, and we saw the growth of jobs in California continue through 2022 and 2023, but that growth is flattening. And the supposition is it will grow at a decreasing rate for 2030, as you can see that slope starting to fall down and get a little bit more flat. For Lake County actually broke out of the pandemic more quickly, flattened out a little bit, and you can see that flat period right now between 2022 and 2026, and then it's meant to take off again. That takeoff is predicated upon a couple of industries getting some momentum between now and 2026. We're going to talk about this in just a second. But for right now, much like, as we're going to see in a minute, other parts of northern rural California, there's been a flattening period after the sort of coming out party from the pandemic. Go ahead and do 4 more clicks, Nicole. So this is Humboldt, Mendocino, Sonoma, and Napa. So you can see that Humboldt and Mendocino are a little bit more flat. That's the green and orange lines. Sonoma and Napa are rising a little faster, and Napa County has really been a star. So one of the things to think about when you think about the SED is how much will Napa County be a partner or a complement to what happens in Lake County as the economic development aspect of the SED are executed, and thinking about it really that they as a partner, it's better than trying to compete. Let's go through a couple more clips there. So these data are as of early 2024, and that growth between 2023 and 2030 is basically about 7% growth to about 18,200 people working at local employers. That does not include cannabis, or in the sense that we have still not counting cannabis jobs in our official data. So I'm not trying to prognosticate how they would add that to the mix yet. But hopefully that will come between now and 2030, and we will see those lines basically all move up parallel, or at least in some way, shapes, and forms above their current levels. There's still a lot of mystery around how many people are actually working in that industry. Hopefully that will be solved over time. The second is to think about how much this growth relies on cannabis construction and sort of the economic impact of those industries moving around, and how realistic is that change in Lake County after 2026. We go to the next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to break down the forecast by industry clusters to kind of look underneath the surface of the water and think, okay, if that's what's going to happen in Lake County, what industries are going to drive that change, which can also provide more shape and more context for the execution of paths within the feds. So you can see transportation, logistics, and utilities are rising relatively quickly, as well as health and private education, primarily through health. So those two industries are the big drivers, but construction and manufacturing just to the left of transportation, logistics, and utilities have relatively decent growth in Lake County. Now, when you click one more click, you're going to see the California analog in percentage terms, and you can see that Lake County right now, at least in the current forecast and my little molding of it in the end, has a little faster manufacturing, has about the same in construction, a little bit less in total, but will kind of follow the state's lead, assuming the state kind of moves forward. And one of the most important aspects to recognize is that without a natural disaster or a major employer leaving the area, small counties, or let's say small suburban areas, tend not to recess outside of a national or state level recession. So as long as the national and state economies continue to move forward, Lake County can use that momentum based on what the Fed is going to tell you, and also just economic development activity walking parallel to get to a better tomorrow. A couple more clicks, please. So these data are, again, from early 2024, same deal. But once again, the farm data there, that negative 5.8, is not including cannabis. So you're starting to see farmers fade a little bit in terms of their hiring. Some of that is technology-based. You can see technology-based looking forward on the other side, where you're seeing info and tech jobs falling a little bit. That's a small number, and the percentage looks really big because you're going from a smaller base. But when you start thinking about how things like AI will be put forward into markets like ag, that might be a sign of the beginnings of that. You can see California you can barely even see California. I don't know why they didn't mark it. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mark California in this, but California, you can see this little bump off the red dotted line. Transportation utilities look strong, as well as healthcare. What does that mean for local residents in terms of the types of jobs that are going to be there in Lake County? And this is true really around rural California. If ag jobs fade, what will pick up that slack? And in healthcare, a good thing, and the answer is from what they pay, yes. From a way of thinking about servicing a local demography versus exporting goods and services. And this is one of the key aspects of what I've done with Chabin over the decades, is we really focus on how to provide economic development planning where you're looking at the outside markets to bring income into the local area and let that outside income swirl around and lift all boats at once. So watch for that as a precursor to potential demographic change. Final slide here is on housing. And the current housing forecast looks like this as of July. The August data are about to come out in about 2 weeks. But if you look on the far right-hand side, unfortunately, the original optimism about Northern California and people moving from all over the place, mainly urban areas within California, to get a better quality of life and work remotely has shifted a little bit. Part of this is also cannabis, and this is one of the ways you can kind of unveil the cannabis conundrum a little bit, is that you can see Lake, Trinity, Mendocino, and Humboldt are all kind of fading, as well as Sonoma and Napa in terms of housing prices. Napa is really because there's been just this race to the top, and now they're starting to pop off in terms of what people are willing to pay. The current median home price, just as a quick aside, in Napa as of last month, about $925,000. That's the middle of the distribution in Napa. So just keep that in mind. California barely increasing, and really the good thing is that this isn't 10 or 15%. Generally speaking, if we see interest rates fade to sort of wrap up and complete the circle, if interest rates fade based on inflation's continued fade and the lack of necessity to keep interest rates relatively high, we should see a little bit more demand in housing. We do not expect a large amount of new supply to come on market, but some of that is predicated upon how well our labor market does. So watch for those three angles in terms of the context changing toward 2030 as the SED was rolled out. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it back over to Nicole.
Thank you, Dr. Eiler. At this point, if there's any questions specifically about the data, it might be a good time to bring those up. Otherwise, we'll keep going on the presentation and we can have another question at the end, if that would.
Go ahead and keep going with
Okay.
the presentation. We'll ask questions at the end.
Great. Okay, so before I move forward, I wanted to talk briefly about how the SEDS is used. So the Economic Development Administration is a federal agency that requires a SEDS in order to get EDA funding. Many other state and federal sources also require some sort of economic development report in order to get grant funding. That report needs to support the underlying reason for the project that you're requesting funding for. So in this case, this report was developed under the EDA's framework that's required for the SEDS, but it is probably the most strenuous in its requirements and therefore can be used by all the agencies in Lake County in order to seek funding and do the work that's supported by the report. So moving forward, there's sort of two ways in which the SEDS makes sense to be used. First is this overarching understanding of where we want Lake County to go when it comes to economic development. And that part of the report is often used when we're starting off in our planning of projects or programs. So this part of the report is kind of like, what are our goals, what are our objectives, what are our target markets, et cetera. Later, we'll talk a little bit more about projects that have already been identified. Maybe some of the planning has been done, maybe some of the initial work has been done, but the EDA might be an avenue to get funding to actually start the project or help with operations on the project or the program. So first, we're going to talk about the goals. Basically, this is the building blocks of the economy. We're looking to support the development of locations that businesses can use to start or grow their business. We're seeking to help workforce, and we're seeking to really maximize our limited capital and resources here in Lake County. Objectives, this is a lot of information, and I apologize, it's all here in fairly small print. Obviously, the PowerPoint will be available to you, and the report shows all of this in much greater details. But the basics here is economic diversification through development areas, which are listed in the report. This is based on a pretty basic economic development theory in that if you're diversified, if you have a hit in the market in one particular area, you have other parts of your economy that help keep you buoyant and doing okay. Visitor amenities, you would expect this to be a big concern for our tourism and hospitality and recreation industries. However, we heard this loud and clear from healthcare, from agriculture, from government, basically across the board. Firms that are looking to bring people to our area need accommodations, including additional lodging options and event centers. I'm going to skip over and go to infrastructure and public safety for just a second. The idea behind this one is really we just need to be able to move people, raw materials, value-added materials, and data with confidence and reliability. So broadband, water, sewer, roads, et cetera. And then lastly, the entrepreneurship and small business and the talent development is where you're going to see a lot of Lake EDC's work and collaboration. And that's the idea that I feel really strongly about, growing our own, being able to give our local residents the resources that they need to start and build businesses here. And then on the other side of that, having our workforce be skilled and ready for the industries that are able to give them living wage jobs. Target industries. So a lot of this was kind of brought up in Dr. Eiler's presentation. You know what most of these things are. I wanted to point out that the last two listed there, the exporting firms and the local serving businesses, are something that the SEDS committee really felt passionate about, in that exporting firms grows the local economy. If you export an item, you bring new money, building a larger pie for Lake County. And then local serving businesses is really this idea that when you start a business here, or if you live here, you need to be able to do business with other local firms. So things like accountants, bookkeepers, et cetera, those secondary business-to-business firms. So now moving on to the second part of the report that is a little bit more focused on projects that the county and its partners will be looking to implement over this 5-year time frame. So these are projects that we worked with Ben to list details about. I'm not going to go into detail with them. They're your projects, but I wanted you to know that they're called out specifically in order for the hope to be able to access EDA funding in the future. And then the last slide is that we worked closely with the tribes to include their projects as well. So the EDA has a set aside that's often specifically for tribes, but that doesn't make them ineligible to access funding in the general pots as well. Some of the tribes locally have economic plans and staff, and others do not. However, that we were as inclusive as we possibly could and created a section that lists those development areas as well in order to help show that collaboration. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our presentation. And if you guys have questions, myself, Dr. Eiler, and Vicki Dole are all here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you to all who put in the work to get this to where it is. I know I've asked you many, many questions in the past, and I think a lot of the answers was, we need to update the set.
Yes.
So here we are. Any questions or comments from board members? Supervisor Green?
Thank you. Very thorough presentation. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the depth of all the stuff in here. It was highlighted. We don't have a lot of data points on our state licensed cannabis industry just yet. That said, and I don't think the EDA template would probably look favorably on that, being the feds that they are. That said, we're into our 8th year of the cannabis regulations here, and we do have something of an industry. So although I don't see it in this report, I do have some ideas on some data sources, including Department of Cannabis Control, our local trade group, and what have you. So when we update this puppy and have additional interviews in future years, I do hope to see some minor bow to our growing cannabis industry. It's probably not the hugest number of jobs, but it's not non-existent either. So I would like to suggest, if I could, some attention to that in future years. But I love everything else I see here. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and make a comment.
Go for it.
Obviously, appreciate this. I think I attended the first one we did of these years back, right? The economic development study we did in Kelseyville, early on. So attended this early on with Dr. Eiler as we move forward. Appreciate it being updated, but I do have to make a comment of, I'm looking at the SEDS committee members here. I don't see any tribes on here.
Okay.
So Tribal Health is a consortium.
Yes.
Ernesto Perdillo is an employee, not a tribal member. So once again, we've got an updated report, but there are 7 tribal nations. I think one of the largest employers, if we do, at least maybe not the largest, but one of the biggest, if you put all 7 nations together, both on our government, our casino sides, one of these days, if Lake County can really get it in their mind that we really got to start looking at the opportunities that the tribal governments give. You have 4 casinos located next to the Bay Area. Beautiful place around a beautiful lake. Why are we still having people driving to Lake Tahoe? It blows me away, and those types of things. I hope we can improve this over the next 5 years. I see there was some bits and pieces in there, but there's so much diversification going on in the tribal nations here. Mm-hmm. There's online businesses that are worldwide, global, that are happening with some of the tribes. There are all kinds of things that are happening that people don't see, and I think, if we can really include that, it'd be good as we move on. Obviously, we got work to do, and like I said, I think there's some confusion sometimes of tribal health and Ernesto Padilla. Tribal health only exists because of the 7 tribal nations. It's underneath each tribal nation. That's the only reason it exists. We all did that, we built it. Each tribe put in their funds to do those things, but every tribal nation's working on a million different things. So I want to make that comment. I appreciate all the work being done, but once again, I got a report where I don't see any tribal leaders or tribal, we all have economic development committees. We run governments just like you guys do here at the county. We just are smaller and we do it internally. But we do work. We sit on a lot of different committees, so I think we're missing out on a huge opportunity in our economies as we're going. After we did shutter our businesses just like everyone else during the pandemic, but we also brought back hundreds of employees as soon as we could open those doors safely and bring those things back. So, another tribe just signed a compact here locally. I know we just finished ours for another 25 years for Middletown Rancheria. I know other tribes have gotten their secretarial decisions completed, so you got at least another quarter of a century going there. You had another tribe just signed by the governor, just signed another compact, so there's another potential opportunity and growth there. So anyway, and then I didn't see anything about in your district, Canocta Harbor Resort, which is coming back some, got a lot of work to do and stuff, I think, but great opportunities that brought thousands and thousands of people. And I think from a tourism standpoint, when you look at these things, no business knows their customer better than the casinos. We track them. That's why we have players cards. That's why we know exactly where they're coming from. Heck, we know their birth dates. We know what they're doing. They know what they like. We do a lot of internal marketing and other things. And, and all of our paperwork, we got the most beautiful scenic drive into Lake County. You have state parks coming over St. Helena, those types of things. So As we work together and continue to grow, because we've come a long ways, I appreciate that. Even I think me having the opportunity to speak today on this is a testament to that. We got work to do, but we appreciate the work being done. We will use this to go out and get economic development. And I keep saying it, the tribes and ourselves, Ben Reckelman just sent something the other day that there may be a collaboration opportunity. If the tribes can really step up, I think we can bring a lot of funds in from the federal dollar standpoint into Lake County to help us all move forward. So hopefully we'll continue those conversations. So please don't take any of my comments as negative. I think we're missing a whole market section. Even Dr. Idler, I didn't hear him talk anything about the tribal nations here in the county. That brings a whole different economy that can even move a little quicker than the cities and the county government, because we internally have those infrastructures to do that. So that's, I appreciate this, and we'll definitely use this and continue growing. So just the only comment, but I didn't see any tribal leaders on that board. All right.
Thank you for your comment. So I know, I think the timing is impeccable. I feel like this should be a document that we keep in mind while we're looking at renewing our general plan and approving the general plan. Are we zoned to support where we feel business growth is going to happen? We don't want to have people come in to rezone so that it can go through that process, which takes a lot of time, just so that we can finally connect to what the future looks like. So I think the timing is impeccable, and it's something we need to keep in mind as we go through the new general plan and area plans and things like that before finally approving. It was interesting in some of the report, it talked about how there was a decrease in poverty in Lake County. I think the increase in the struggle, and that was kind of alluded to by Dr. Eiler, of middle class and lower class. So it's hard to see that, yes, we've decreased that, but we also know that the struggle of groceries and electricity and everything else is very real. So it's hard to say that's a good thing when the outside forces are unfortunately working against us at that level. There was another interesting part in there that said that we were at a higher level than the state on remote work, like barely higher. I think it was like 14% versus 13%. Do you know what the breakdown of work sectors the remote workers identify as? Is it tech? Is it government? Is it... Just kind of curious what those sectors were.
I don't know that off the top of my head. Dr. Eiler or Vicki, do you have any comments or information?
No, I don't know that off the top of my head either. Thank you for that question. I'm not sure if census tracks that at a sort of granular level in such a way that it would be informative. But I can work with Nicole real quick and see if I can track down something just to kind of, provide some answer or some inkling as to what changes have taken place.
I'd agree with you, Rob. I don't think that they track it at that detail. We might be able to make some inferences if we can get the information as far as the, kind of the wage levels of the folks that are working at home. We could kind of make some assumptions.
And I appreciate that. And maybe I'm being naive in thinking that different remote work requires different infrastructure to ensure that we can help support the growth of those remote work sectors. I don't know. Maybe everybody needs the same level of broadband access and whatnot. But in my opinion, if I'm just writing stuff, versus doing remote video work or things like that, I would suspect that there's a different level of need of infrastructure to ensure that that job is compatible with what we have here. But I could be wrong. But again, I think this is perfect timing to complete this. And this, I know you were just at the city of Clear Lake. Obviously, you're doing your rounds to the jurisdictions to do your presentations. Is this the final version? When is the final version planning to be completed?
We hope to gather the remaining comments this week, and the SEDS committee will approve in their meeting in September.
And I think one of the big ones that comes up to mind for me is the potential drop in agriculture. We are an agricultural county. I know that the board just recently maybe not that recently, close to a year ago, helped rejuvenate, the Food Policy Council with the idea of supporting agriculture, more specifically in food production, to ensure sustainability and resiliency during emergencies and just normal everyday. Hopefully that can have an impact to reverse that -5 or -4% that it was at, but that is a great concern to me, as that really changes potentially the identity of who Lake County is. So while some of those things are projections, that doesn't mean that there can't be policy or there can't be work behind the scenes that help to change some of those things to find new ways to support those industries and have that growth rather than that decrease. So, those are my only comments. Appreciate the level of work, the level of detail, and again, your timing, I think, is impeccable. Vice Chair Crandall.
A lot has already been said, so I'm just going to touch on one thing, and that is on either, I don't think it's a challenge, and it's kind of both challenge and an opportunity to get a grasp on short-term rentals. I know that's something that we can do at our level, and I know that the tax collector's working on it. I just wanted to bring that to your attention and know that we understand that that's a challenge right now, and it's happening in many other rural counties too. So just wanted to give that insight.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
One other thing, a unique business has been brought recently to Lake County too, is the glamping industry part of that too, to look at that as we're going forward. I think Six Sigma's got a great product out there that they brought to Lake County. I think that fits right in that growth opportunity. We've always thought about traditional growth in hotel rooms and that type of space, but I really think, I know we talk recreation, I know we talk lodging and everything, but I think that's a unique opportunity to keep growing. It helps with the bike ride, the mountain biking, everything that we're doing. I think there's some unique properties around the county. We're talking about zoning to help those type of expansions, and I think other people are thinking in that direction, so I think it really ties into everything too. I don't know where it fits into the report, but I think that's a missing part too as we're going forward, because it's less on the environment. As the construction goes, gives you different opportunities as you're moving forward there. And it kind of ties into that ecotourism, the work that Tara's doing for restoration, all the stuff the Risk Reduction Authority's doing, the prescribed burn things and everything. I just saw a report today, UC Davis agreeing that small controlled fires are way better. And I think that economy that isn't in here, because we're going to have folks that really don't need a lot of education. You go in there, you're just a hard worker. You can pick up, a tool to do the work out there, a chainsaw, other things. Another economy position that we've positioned ourselves for in Lake County to grow that workforce and economic development stuff. So the hard work being done by everybody.
Supervisor Pyska?
One of the things that I've been talking with Ben a lot about over the last year is the need for, or the potential growth for satellite offices, because we have so many people that are commuting or working remotely, but their parent company might recognize that they have several employees that live in county in an area, and so how can we develop some newer office space that can serve for those satellite offices? I do have someone who has an engineering firm in Napa, and he lives here, and it has been the long-range plan to develop a satellite office here, and now they have. So they bought their building, but now they have to go through a lot of renovations. So if there's some sort of easy way to have these little hub office spaces in our little downtowns, I think that will only help. It's hard when you work remotely and then you have to make a 2-hour commute or a 3-hour commute. And so having that synergy right in our little downtown area, feeding our little shops and restaurants is something that Ben and I've been talking about for a long time. One of my priorities.
Thank you.
One more thing too, I was reading through and looking in the report, is the facade look for each one of the communities coming together to really put that together as you're coming over the mountain, Mount St. Helena, Middletown, you go right through it, getting the buildings all painted up, nice, the curb walks, sidewalks that are going to be coming in the next few years that tie everything together, the facade look. I know there's conversations in each one of our districts going on, but I'd love to see that that's in there, because those grant opportunities, I think, will really really drive the business, the small business independent owners, to help get those things going and to give that really good look that, you know, as you're driving through town, of what our communities are and who we are. So I think I really like that little section there on those things, because the conversations are happening. We just got to find a way, and maybe this is the opportunity to do that. So thank you guys for the work on that.
And I do know that Mr. Rickelman was working on a facade grant or a facade project. It looks like he might be coming up to talk about it.
Good morning, Ben Rickelman, Deputy County Administrative Officer. A few comments regarding the facades. So with the upcoming state CDBG economic development round, that's going to be part of our application. I think Jeff is actually going to speak to that in a little bit. So that is in the pipeline. We anticipate that launching somewhat soon. And I'll also just say with the EDA funding, it's I would say a moderate appropriation each year with the public infrastructure and economic adjustment assistance. That being said, you know, there might be next year, year after, a reconciliation bill, which happened with ARPA and CARES, where there's a large amount of money coming to EDA all of a sudden, and you have a fairly quick turnaround. So if you have a well-prepared comprehensive economic development strategy, that will really help get that money.
Thank you very much. So there was one other item I wanted to bring up, the education projections and status. So if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're seeing an increase in high school graduate rates, but a decrease in college graduation rates, bachelor's, and I don't know if it was AA degrees, but like I said, professional degrees, which I'm thinking is more elevated than bachelor's. It talked a lot about, not a lot, but it discussed Woodland, it discussed Mendo College, just the potential of those expansions and additions. I think one of them was like student housing. Another one was expansion of programs and maybe more buildings for Mendocino College. But there was not really, in my opinion, a mention about dual enrollment focus at the high school level, where we can have high school graduates come out with an AA degree who are ready to fill in some of the positions that still require an AA degree in order to get started. I know that I'm speaking with Woodland Community College. In the past, we had a great pathway, a pipeline for human and health services degrees, where a lot of our up-and-coming directors and manager positions currently at Behavioral Health and Social Services, those folks went through those programs. And so trying to resurrect what used to be, because things have changed. But if we can get more of those opportunities at our high school levels and really connect that so that it's workforce development, that can be from trade school stuff, what do they call it? The CTE, career technical education, as well as the dual enrollment towards degrees. Simultaneously, those students will be better prepared to make money as soon as they're 18 and start their careers, rather than that starting point of adulthood that is so 1950s, 1970s way of doing things. So that's one way to help, and I didn't see that really identified as a potential resource or opportunity to really help out with the workforce development in the package that I read.
Thank you, Chair Sabatier. Since we published this draft, there has been additional data that has come to the service through Mendocino College. I've not yet received the data from Woodland, but we are looking at including some of that dual enrollment data, and it from the initial glance at it, it does break down where the student lives and like what high school they're connected to, and then if they're connected to the college at the Lake Center or online or the Ukiah Center. So there's a good amount of data there, and so we're trying to flesh out what it means and how we can include it in the report. So I apologize it's not in this draft, but it is on its way to being added. I don't know that we're going to have Woodland's data in time, but I know that there is additional push to get more information and get that going in that area as well.
And I know they just had quite the change in leadership
Yes.
from top to bottom, president, all the way down to the dean of the campus locally. So maybe that could be part of the reason that it's been difficult to get that data, but hopefully you can get it, because I think it's an important aspect of working towards the future development of our youth to be prepared for careers.
And it doesn't, not having the data included as an appendix doesn't mean that the call to action for needing to work on that can't be included. It just means we don't have it yet. So we can still include that as part of our overarching goals and objectives.
Thank you very much. And without any further pens up, let's open it up for public comment. I'm going to start in the Zoom room with a hand. Betsy Kahn.
Good morning, Chair Sabachi, and thank you, Board, for this opportunity to speak to you. As a member of the public, my name is Betsy Kahn. First, I would like to say that I do not find this particular plan to be anything but mostly reiterative of all the previous plans. I don't find anything strikingly novel or innovative. It's very repetitive of all the things that we've heard in the last previous plans. I'm very concerned that the comments provided by the supervisors, Supervisor Peiska, Supervisor Simon, Supervisor Green, Supervisor Sabatier, they should be in this plan, not, something, because these are crucial elements that apparently aren't in this plan. For example, but not exclusively, the tribal industries and economic contributions. I wouldn't want to see this plan move forward without incorporating all of that input. The Food Security Council, locally grown foods, the concept that we're going to somehow create exportable products. Well, I don't know how many times we've been through proposals for developing products that can be exported and then realizing, oh my God, it costs too much to ship things. And we know what that's about. In terms of the colleges, how many times have we had this conversation about the high schools and the enrollment in high school programs that lead to college education, healthcare, law enforcement, environmental work that has to be done here. We have those arenas of education and opportunities. They're not particularly glamorous, and so they're not part of an economic development plan. And then we have housing and short-term occupation or short-term rentals. And facade improvements. Facade improvements, we started those in the year 2000, and we still have this idea that we're going to be able to, put a pretty face on a building, and we have all these old buildings that are not really adequate to the kind of services that you want to bring in, such as the office buildings, the remote site buildings, and so forth. Well, we have to find a way to develop those areas and industries within the county, so that we have the workforce housing, we have student housing, we have affordable housing, and we can bring in people, and we have to have health and safety, and especially we need to address the neglect of the environment. We just had a 2-day scientific symposium on the entire.
You can please finish your
watershed.
comment.
Sorry, I'll wrap up. We had a scientific symposium that identified many, many ways in which we could be bringing people in, and I didn't hear anything about science as a source of economy here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will speak on a couple of things. Certain things, yes, have been tried and were part of previous strategic plans. That doesn't mean you have to throw it out and not go with a new strategy. For example, working with the colleges and the high schools, that has evolved. It used to be ROPS, and that didn't work very well. Now they turned it into dual enrollment, where you are treated more like a college student. ROPS was basically a pass-fail. That's how it worked. You did not get an actual grade if you had above a certain grade level, but you didn't receive a degree. You just showed that you passed a class. Now you are able to get degrees. I was actually part of the college where we really enhanced dual enrollment, created the middle college, and that first cohort, we had 3 or 4 students that got an AA degree just coming out of that cohort, and it continues to grow. Certain things take time, and I don't think we should give up on good ideas just because it hasn't necessarily worked in the past. We can evolve and do better in order to continue to do the work that makes sense to continue being focused on. That doesn't mean that this is perfect, but I think that some of the things that you mentioned, for example, I don't think economic development strategy is more about the sectors of the industry rather than, for example, fix your lake and you'll do better. The lake is obviously going to help tourism, but it doesn't build the industries necessarily. And I could be mistaken and you can disagree, but that's just, I think this is very well focused. And I think we need to keep trying, and things still make sense. Anyways, that's my response to that. I see no further hands up. I don't see anybody getting up in the board chambers, and bring it back to the board. Supervisor Green.
Yeah. To the speaker's comments, and obviously this is kind of a living document of sorts. We use that phrase for a lot of things. But I wonder, Ms. Flora, if you could, it appears this is a draft document. It looks like CEDS is supposed to convene tomorrow to vote on submission of the strategy. So can you just talk a little bit about process and how living this particular living document is, if you're on a deadline to get it forwarded to EDA, et cetera. So, because I think it's fair. You do want to incorporate comments.
Yes.
That's why we have a draft document. That's why you have public meetings, not just here, but it looks like both City of Clear Lake and City of Lakeport. So you can explain a little bit about the process and how you will be able to incorporate the comments you receive from those various agencies.
Yes. So we opened this document with a press release last month. The intention was to close comments after today's presentation and the presentation to Lakeport this evening. However, we are going to keep comments open because these public meetings are happening through the end of this week. We are not going to be voting tomorrow at the SEDS meeting to approve this particular draft. The SEDS committee will meet in September, the third Wednesday. I can't remember the date of that meeting off the top of my head, but during that meeting, the comments will have been incorporated, and that finalized version will be approved by the committee. After that, we do have to submit the approved copy to EDA for approval and make sure that all of the required parts of the process were complete. And then once they approve it, then it's finalized for 5 years. The idea, theoretically, is after the conclusion of the 4th year, you start drafting the next version. What happened this time was there was a lapse. However, that's the intention, is to finalize it and have it for 5 years, and then at the completion of that 5 years, we'll have a new one to replace it.
And then final comment, I do appreciate the fact that you did reach out to the tribes in order to get the concepts of what projects they are working on. I do agree with my colleague of looking to diversify the committee and seeing if you can invite tribal leaders from those tribes to be a part of the committee to ensure that we are seeing this from every perspective. They're an important jurisdiction within Lake County and great partners to help us reach our goals economically and for other purposes as well. Just wanted to support that statement and leave you with that. And no further comments. This is just a presentation only, no
Yes.
motion or action needed. Thank you very much for your presentation and the work behind that, and to your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.